So, what does it mean to go inside and to get to know yourself, to come home, to create a really deep and important relationship with your highest self?
Yeah, so that's all that we talked about in this episode. And I just love this conversation because it really does bring that bigger picture and awareness into what it is that we truly need as humans. And that's to reconnect with our soul, with our essence. And it kind of just helps everything else dissolve that we get attached to and that we allow into our life that doesn't really serve our higher purpose or why we're even here.
Yeah, and I love how the conversation got into just normalizing the emotional turmoil that comes up for people. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, just those shadow elements that we've spoken about before, how we do experience loss and grief and depression and anxiety and all these polarities, and we have the other polarities of joy and happiness and abundance, and it's all of it's okay. So it's really about being able to speak to these and not get stuck in them all the time. But yeah, I love the conversation. I love that it went there, and also into like the masculine and feminine energies and just what we're seeing in the world right now and how we can shift our perspectives. So you guys listen to this one, maybe take notes if you need to, maybe pull out a yoga mat and listen to it with the headphones in, whatever you need to do.
Yeah, lovely. And yeah, let us know what you think. So these are really important conversations to us. We feel they're important conversations to the people we work with because it's giving space to really go inside. So love to hear what you think. Please share away on the comment section below and
write your reviews.
Yep. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And we'll keep pumping out more content like this and many, many more to come.
Awesome.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Health Ignited. I'm here with my lovely, amazing wife, Dr. Sonia Jensen. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, it's funny. I'm going to repeat what I said to Amanda just before we had her on. We saw her photo and Sonia right away says, oh, she looks like she's lots of fun.
You can usually tell by a picture, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm so excited.
Exactly. So who we're speaking to today is the lovely Amanda Monnier. Hopefully I pronounced the last name right. Awesome. So Amanda is transitioned into her soul work from a career in law enforcement. I can't wait to ask that question. After feeling the nudge to go all in on herself, she believes in each of us activating our own inner healer and healing through connection to our own divinity. She holds space for healing ancestral patterns, conditioning, imprints, beliefs, and shifts into your fullest embodiment of who you are at the soul level. We all need a lot of that. So Amanda is completely committed, reminding others that everything they ever need was always inside. Amanda, there's so much more to say, and we can't wait to talk to you about all those things. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Doctors Nick and Sonia. I'm so happy to be here. Very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, amazing. Well, like I said in our introduction, we got to know, how did you go from law enforcement into this amazing world of opportunity and beauty and looking within? Because that's not a typical, transition.
Yeah. First of all, how to get into law enforcement. I mean, I don't even know how I ended up there, but I did. So yeah, I was a probation officer for about 6 years. And it was about 2 years in that I had this awakening in consciousness and really just started to ask myself, what is like the deeper meaning of life? Because I had been experiencing a lot of health issues, a lot of emotional stuff. It just was a lot of patterning. It felt like a lot of cyclical patterns. So I'm going to give the condensed version, but it stemmed from a very painful breakup that brought all this density to the surface. It was like, some people might call it a dark night of the soul, whatever you want to call it. But all this density came up to the surface. And I just really started this kind of journey to what I later termed was just a journey back to myself, but this journey searching for different health stuff. I was vegan for 2 years. Like I tried every holistic thing because my skin was just riddled with acne pretty much my entire life up until about a year ago. And so that was a big motivator for me, along with these very painful patterns. So I think it was mainly like this search. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this stuff actually works. And so I became very passionate about it. And I realized a couple years ago that I wasn't going to be in law enforcement for the rest of my life. And so I was like, okay, how can I bring what I've learned and help others who have maybe been struggling as well. Like one of the things I really struggled with was this fear of judgment and just had very low self-worth. And so really what it was is I was just so disconnected from myself, and my body was just reflecting that to me. And so it just became where I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take the leap. I quit my job. I sold my home, like all the things. I just really was guided to let a lot of these things go, because what I learned is that all these different things that we hold on to are just based on these different identity structures that were like, I don't know who I am without this character that I'm playing, or I don't know who I am without this home or all these external accolades. And it's all simply not true. So just became very powerful process. And it just became something I'm very passionate about, really empowering others to remember this, because we all have a unique soul medicine, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. And again, we just become disconnected from it. So it's just really about remembering it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not an easy path for many people. I think many long for that connection, but can't always put words to what that missing desire is, because we are told so many stories and we're given so many identities from the day we are born. And then we keep playing that role until something either drastic happens or there's like an emotional upheaval, like you were speaking to with a breakup. So I would love to hear what that soul searching for you actually looked like. Like, how were you able to kind of unravel that and go from, this environment that, of course, you probably stepped into because you wanted to be of service. I know when I was little, like I wanted to be a police officer because I wanted to help people. But now when I think about it, there's no way I would have survived that kind of environment. And I just couldn't do the things that I'm doing today in service to like women in the world the way my soul really wants me to. So how were you able to kind of unravel those old identities and then create this other life by listening to that soul, like those whispers that come?
Yeah. Yeah. And there were so many different things along my journey, because it's just an ongoing process. For example, and I'm very open about this stuff. Like this weekend, I had this pattern came up and I was in tears pretty much the entire weekend, to where I was like, oh my gosh, because it was just rooted in a lot of this stuff in childhood. So it's been a combination of different things, but the energy work has been so powerful for me, because even just energy work can even just being present, because oftentimes when these patterns come up, it's like the ego and the unconscious doesn't want to deal with it because it's the way we've kept safe. So at some point or another, the pattern or whatever we're experiencing probably did serve at one point in time. For me, my patterns did serve because it was the way that I kept myself safe. So I had a lot of abandonment wounds and things as a kid. And so I kept seeing these show up in these painful patterns with men. And really, if we get like foundational with the energy work, again, this presence of just being here for what is showing up. That's one of like the easiest things that I can give people, as far as if they're not working with somebody, is allowing the emotion to come up to the surface, because it's actually like, I've found it's like that resistance to going there is sometimes the harder part than actually going there. And just like yesterday, I just literally laid in bed and there were bouts of crying and all sorts of things coming up. And I've gotten to the point to where I don't even always need to know exactly what it is, because this stuff can be so layered. And so how I explain it is we have this channel and we're connected to our highest, we're connected to source. And then all these other things, we can call them conditioning, the imprints, the undigested bouts of trauma, emotion that gets stored in the physical body. And then if they haven't been processed, then they're still vibrating in the physical body. And so we see it as a manifestation of dis-ease and different things. So I always say too, it's not one size fits all. So different things that work for me might not work for somebody else. So meditation is another huge one that has really helped me. And for people who maybe haven't started a meditation practice, you can start one. And even if it's just a minute of bringing that presence and really just focusing on your breathing, because we've also become so disconnected from our breath and from really just being able to sit there, and also even in our body. So if there's a lot of like nervous system trauma and trauma in general, and we don't want to be in our body, then that could be a very foundational place to start, is working with the nervous system, because we can't get into like the deeper stuff if the nervous system's all out of whack. So, and the meditation and the breathing really can get us into that parasympathetic state to where we're able to not be in fight or flight mode. So that's another thing that comes up. So, but yeah, to kind of circle back and answer your question, really connecting with my own intuition and really learning what that looks like, because that's different for everyone as well. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but of human design, but that was something that's really helped me because it's kind of a tool. So all these different modalities and things are just tools. And I found for me, they show up when I'm ready to kind of go a little bit deeper. So if you listeners haven't pulled your human design and it's kind of pinging in your body, that might be a beautiful place to look, because that can tell you a lot about how you respond to the world, like your energetic blueprint, if you will. So really going down to the foundational level of really building that relationship with yourself first and getting in touch with how your body processes energy and the external world, how you feel just sitting in silence. Because another thing I'll mention is in society, we have these templates and conditionings around productivity and consumerism and the do. But when we don't take the moments to pause, it's like we're just constantly doing and we're not checking in with ourselves at that deeper level. And we take the soul out of the equation. And then that's when we become more disconnected from ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you're sharing. It's so important for people to appreciate where they get stuck and to, sometimes I like what you said there too, just with regards to not really needing to know why we're feeling a certain way. I think in the world that we live in, it's so common to label and to identify and to speak into, the pain and really discover why. And why probably is a really important journey at some point, especially if there's a theme that continues to show up or repeat itself over time. But I'm curious, I would love to hear you go into why you don't feel like labeling what you're feeling is necessary.
So, we can. I feel there are some things that I have, like my soul has wanted me to have that conscious awareness around. So don't want to say yes or no one way or the other. I think it's all depending on where we are in our journey and what we're processing. Because there's some things where I've had those aha moments where I'm like, oh my gosh. And sometimes even that conscious awareness will actually release that energy from our body, because our consciousness and our power of choice is just exponentially powerful. So when we do choose and agree to things, like that is the truth. I'm sure you guys have seen it with the kind of work you do, or even maybe people coming to you. I know someone who was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Prior to going in for the diagnosis, 0 symptoms. And then the doctor said, you have Parkinson's. That literally a week later, shaking hands, like all the telltale symptoms of Parkinson's, because he agreed to the diagnosis. And so not to say there wasn't other stuff going on, but as humans, we love to label things. And if everything foundationally is just energy, and we have low vibrational energy and we have those higher, more expansive states, then it simplifies it a little bit. So what I'll say, like the low, for example, like low vibrational energies, like the guilt, the fear, the shame, the unworthy. And then the more expansive ones like love, joy, we can all kind of feel into the fact that those feel a little better. And so when we have these dense energies that are in our body, again, they can cause those diseases in the different, we can call them the chakra systems or the organs. All kinds of different things can happen. And then we see the physical manifestation. So again, with the labeling, I feel like sometimes if we label something, then it's like people are agreeing to it and it continues to get reinforced. And then they associate with, I am this disease, I am this label, rather than if we're just feeling the things that are coming up and allowing them to move out of us and being present for what is, we're not attaching to them. So there's not that attachment piece that continues to reinforce what we're being maybe told and just accepting from what someone else is saying. And so it just really gives the power back to the individual, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think it goes back to just how the brain functions too. It's easier for the brain to compartmentalize and to identify and to label, to kind of feel safe and secure, because trauma in itself is so disorganized. And when there's that feeling of disorganization, which comes up when there's emotion and we're trying to like sink into that emotion to move through it, it creates chaos. So it's easier for people to kind of latch onto an identity or a diagnosis, because now there's an understanding. And so that gives that sense of control. And then from there, we try to really find evidence in our environment to feed that identity or that label or whatever it is that's been put on us. So I love that you're bringing up the fact that we just have to kind of unravel all of that to really be able to create this new relationship with the soul. So I would love for you to define for our listeners, because, you know, everyone has a different relationship to the soul. Like, what to you, what is the soul?
I feel like the soul in conjunction with the higher self is that all the isness of us. Like, we can't put it into a box or into a container. To me, the higher self and the soul, it contains all the wisdom and information. If you believe in past incarnations, ancestral stuff, all the things, all the encodings, all the innate wisdom, all the wisdom of your gifts, all the wisdom of what you're here to experience. Because I don't know about you guys, but as I continue to like wake up or expand my consciousness, I feel the less I know. And so what I'm saying might even be triggering to some people, because I feel like as we're shifting, it's like we're being called to let go of more and more. And for me, that's what I'm experiencing is all the things I thought were the truth. And I'm being guided to just literally let it all go, so that, because I feel we're co-creating with the universe and that we're a unique expression of God. It's not separate. We've all these infiltration templates of separateness and all the things that have caused all this chaos and pain on the planet. And it's within and without, because I feel like we're seeing it on the main stage right now. It's like people might be like, oh, the world's going to, you know, to hell. It's a circus right now. But what's happening, I feel, is just reflection of where we're not in alignment, because we've evolved past that. And we're ready for something much deeper. And we're ready for like health and vitality. We're ready to express our souls on a deeper level. And like the 8 to 5 cubicle stuff and the GMO nasty foods, like, just aren't resonating with people anymore. And so I think as a collective, what we're seeing is the dismantling of all of this on a collective level. And then we're going through it within as well. And the more we hold on to these things, the more life's trying to like shake us out of it. And so I kind of went a little sideways from the question, but I just feel like the soul is really just the most expansive, infinite. It doesn't know any bounds. It doesn't know the conditioning. And so we can drop into that place and that wisdom that is within us, that we can't forget it. It just really can get mucked up with the density. We think we forget it, but we really can't. And that's, again, why our soul, the universe, attempts to get our attention in all different ways. Might be through a painful breakup. It might be through a diagnosis or whatever we want to call it. But it's always, I do feel that the universe is always working in our favor to show us these deeper understandings so we can step more into who we truly are as a soul. And I feel that if we were doing this as a collective, or even half the population, if we were waking up and being like, I am so excited for what I get to do today, the ripple effects that are sent out to the planet, it's just, I feel like it would be game changing. And I do feel that is what's happening right now.
I love that.
Yeah. So we knew that she's gonna be lots of fun, because the way she's expressing everything, and hopefully people listening to you are really, tapping in the vitality that you share. It's really important to be able to reframe something that's going on in our world, because I think a lot of people get so stuck in their story and their trauma, and they're not really even differentiating life from this experience of the soul within. And when I think when there's a detachment there, a disconnect, it's so hard to really like look at the positivity, right? Because someone could just say like, well, you're just being like, Sonia kind of grills me for this, is sometimes like, oh, you're just like always have to be positive. You always have to look at the bright side of things. Like, where do we bring in the shadow? Because, so many people are playing this out and maybe not really recognizing they're there. But let's help people sort of like merge this gap between just, oh, everything's going to be wonderful. Shadow. So Sonia loves a shadow. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm here for this conversation because that is so true. I think we see both, where it's like love and light only, positive. Like, no. I have been here for the shadow since I started this journey. And I feel
even just being a law enforcement officer, I mean, like you had like some real physical reality with the shadow too. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Literally, you get to deal with people's shadow all day long, because it's just that it's the trauma coming out in all different ways. But Absolutely. So I am definitely not here for the bypassing. And one thing that I've learned, it's like, I don't need to shame the shame or judge the judgment, because I'll give an example of my own processes. It was part of what I've been moving through, and kind of what I went through this weekend even was like, there are moments where I'm just like, gosh, like this is sucks. Like it really sucks, to where I'm even just observing, and then I'll like see this higher part of me that's like, okay, like we can be here for the fact that this sucks right now. And we don't have to be like, oh, love and light, this is so great. Like I know when I've released whatever the heck I'm releasing right now, it's going to feel like a weight was lifted off me. But we don't have to pretend like when we're going through those dense emotions that it's sunshine and rainbows, because it isn't. And I have been there. There was a time, this is probably several months ago, because in this last year, and it's been in the pause, and I'm really selling the pause right now, right? I'm like, everyone pause. It's going to feel so great. But this was, I think part of it, I'll say this, because I think part of the reason why this has been coming up in the last year is because when I did leave my career in law enforcement and started my business, it did open up space to where I was now more in control of my schedule. And so it's like, I didn't have to show up to an 8 to 5, and I wasn't distracted anymore. And I said yes to this work. And so it was like, okay, like all the stuff just started unraveling at a very deep level. So as far as the shadow, yeah, it's so, I feel like, I don't know if important is the word I want to use, but it's truth, right? Especially for where we're at right now. Like people ask me all the time, do you think we're going to be doing this deep, dark healing work forever? My answer is no. And I think maybe some people I've heard yes, but for me, it's a choice. No, because there's only so deep I can go as far as the trauma that I've experienced and, the density. But I feel that when we meet these parts of us, because it's the parts of us that have, the painful, like inner child stuff, like for example, and that the stuff that we've experienced as a child that wasn't able to be digested, it's like still sitting there in the energy field or in the body. And so what we're doing is we're meeting these parts of us that we haven't been able to process the heaviness, the density, the emotion, whatever we want to call it. And so it's still vibrating in our energy field. It's still there, just wanting an acknowledgement so we can choose something else. Because if we've had, these identity structures and these experiences, let's take an event, for example, like a very painful event that someone has had. Maybe it was, again, let's go with a painful breakup so we don't trigger anything too crazy. And let's say that the person just said, I'm unworthy, like zero of the emotion was processed. It's like they're frozen in time. And so that is something that it's still there. It's in the field and it's ready. It wants to be processed, right? Like the emotions want to be seen, felt, heard, acknowledged. And we've, as a society, been taught to disconnect from that part of ourselves. Like if someone is physically sick, it's like, oh, take 2 weeks off work, see you later, feel better, like watch TV. But if it's an emotional thing, it's like, suck it up. So I'm here for normalizing the processing of these painful things, because these are the things that turn into the physical things. So when we have these shadow aspects that are, again, it's just the density that just, again, they want to come to the surface. And they want to be met just so we can digest and move through and actually choose our highest. Because it's like, if you think about putting on like weighted vests, it's like we can only put on so many weighted vests until it just becomes too much for people. And so I feel that sometimes then it could be a spontaneous spiritual awakening, or again, the physical ailments, like the parts cry out in some way, shape, or form because they want that release. Like we want that. We don't want to be bogged down by these heavy emotional things. We don't want to resent our parents. We can really free ourselves because we can't control what anybody else is doing on the outside, but we can resolve it from a place on the inside. And I'll give another example of the inner child work. So if I'm working with someone on inner child healing, we will actually, I call it like reparenting the inner child, but we'll actually go meet that child if something comes up, and we'll hold space for that child like that child needed. And maybe the caregivers were kind of in their unconscious and it was so chaotic. And so no one was maybe able to explain to the child what was going on. And so the child created a story to stay safe. But what we can actually do is go back in time, because I don't believe time is linear, as our human constructs have told us. We can go back and we can do what I call as a change history and release that density from that now moment. And then we can choose something else. We don't have to we can rewrite the story, essentially. We don't have to keep playing out that story that I'm unworthy, like no one loves me. We go back and we turn that pain into wisdom, and it frees one of those layers of the heaviness.
Yeah, I think you said a lot of things in there that we can even unpack even more. And, the pause, I love. It's every chapter in my book, I have a pause moment. Just to kind of reiterate the importance between that stimulus and response, how we really need to pause before we either react to something or respond to something. And, the other important piece that I think you really brought up is that relationship between the shadow and the light. Shadow and light, they can't exist without each other. If you look at the yin and yang, it's within each other. And that balance is so important, and normalizing all the polarities of emotions. Like, we're human, so we're going to feel sad, we're going to feel grief, we're going to feel loss, we're going to feel these things. But it's when we get stuck in one that there's a challenge in experiencing the other polarity. So really having these conversations to just normalize that, for us, when we're talking about hormones, for women think they have to feel the exact same way throughout the entire month. But well, no, after you ovulate, you're going to feel a little bit of loss. You're going to feel some sadness. You're going to feel this, and it's okay. It's okay to feel anxious before doing a big presentation or around life. We don't have to medicate everything. We don't have to ignore everything. So I think it's great that you're bringing that awareness up in the energy body and also in the physical body too. So what I would like to do is to kind of transition this conversation into those polarities, like the yin and the yang, the masculine and feminine, and how you work with those two energies and how we can create a relationship with both within ourselves and then also with others around us, so that we can just understand ourselves and others better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things to point out is there have been a lot of inversions on the planet where it's like, masculinize the feminine and soften the masculine. And we see that in a lot of the agenda. So I just want to point that out, because I was full out in my masculine. I mean, I worked in law enforcement, and we can have healthy masculine and healthy feminine. But then I feel that when we enter into these kind of unhealthy things where we don't have that balance, that's when we can kind of run into some, again, where we have, it feels out of balance because it is. And then where we feel off and we're not in our fullest expression. So I'll give kind of a little illustration of what I mean by that. So when I was in law enforcement, being in my masculine, for me being in my masculine, that was the way I kept myself safe, because being in my feminine wasn't safe since I was a childhood. That was my perception of it, because the feminine is all about flow and intuition and playfulness, and that sexual energy is just very we can all feel that. It just feels so nice and nurturing and vulnerable. And the masculine is, more of that like action oriented energy and the safety and all that kind of like, healthy masculine also feels really good. But for me, I wasn't ever in my feminine, and I was in that more masculine, that productivity that we kind of spoke of, that just burnout, because it was do. And then there wasn't that time for the pauses and the inner reflection and the checking in. And am I even being playful? Like, there was a period of time where I didn't even take a day off for, I think it was like 16 days. I worked 16 days and I didn't even take a day off, working like some 15-hour shifts and crazy stuff like that. And so I feel that sometimes as women, we do this because it's like we're not wanting to check in. Like, we're not wanting to have that silent space, because for me, when I'm by myself and when I'm in the silence, that's when the stuff comes up, because it's like, excuse me. But when we're in like that masculine, more action oriented mode, then, we're just in kind of more production mode. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because we do need both. And so it's finding that balance of even, because to me, the masculine, I love like the word inspired action. And so when we have those pauses and when we get those downloads of information, whether it be maybe it's like the next action step to take, but maybe we cut out like, 10 steps by just pausing and listening. And to me, meditation is one of the ways I do that. And I've even used the word, I'm just listening. I'm listening for like what wants to come through from that higher expression. And we can set the intention to tune into our higher self and to get that information. And so, yeah, just to kind of tie it all together, it's just, again, this balancing of both, and to maybe taking a little inventory. Am I just in straight work mode, or am I in straight zero action mode? And why is that? What is there something that I don't want to look at? Is there something that maybe I'm avoiding a little bit? Is there a way that this is serving me? Usually with our behavior, there's a way that it's serving us at a deeper level. And when we're willing to see the truth, and when we choose to see the truth, it'll always come up. It may not be in the way that we think it will, but it'll always show up. And so just getting into that healthy relationship with both. And there are people, I haven't dedicated my life's work to this, but there are people that have literally dedicated their life's work to the inner reunification of the masculine and feminine polarities, that like eros, gamos union within, and then also that partnership without, because it's just, it's such a beautiful expression of those polarities. And then we can experience those in partnership too, because again, going back to the feminine, I can speak from my perspective. There are so many of us women that have taken on the roles of men. And I feel that it just causes so many distortions. And I've even met some men that are like, I don't even know what to do because I got yelled at for opening the door. It's like, women, if we can just relax just a little bit and just, it's okay. Like, they're not telling us that we aren't like able and capable. It's, but again, it goes to the conditioning. So just bringing some of those awarenesses. Like, I'm all for women doing, amazing, beautiful, accomplished things. But I think that intention is so powerful. So I always ask, it's like, what is the intention behind this thing that we're doing? And so if we can take it back and maybe even go like deeper when we say, oh, this is the intention, like, can we go a little deeper on what that intention is? Then that can give us some foundational illustrations on like what is going on deeper. And then we can kind of work with those polarities and see maybe where am I not being playful? Where am I not taking action?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important. And especially when we talked about identities and labels earlier, I think it's easy to sit in the gender of the physical form and really have an expectation this is how we're supposed to show up. But there's, people that show up in all sorts of different expressions of the actual energy of the masculine, feminine, and some are going to be inherent traits of just who they tend to present themselves to the world. And then sometimes it's the conditioning of like, well, like you mentioned, like I wasn't really allowed to express my femininity at a young age. And I think appreciating like there's a difference between gender and these masculine and feminine energies. And there may be some, relationships where you've got a man and woman, or man and man, or woman and woman, and each of them are sort of like oriented into, a stronger expression of masculine or a stronger expression of feminine. There's a great book by Dr. David Data, or I don't know if he's a doctor, but David Data. He wrote the book called The Way of the Superior Man. He really talks about these like blended, realities where we can, sort of swing between these energies of masculine and feminine. And so, I always think when you're speaking and when I think of these things, I think about restoration. So like if we're spending so much time over here, well, how do we sort of just balance the equation? Not that we have to completely reorient a masculine, framework or reference into a feminine one, but how do we just like nurture and balance this other side? And I think of like a relationship that is like exercise, over exercise. Just go. I got to hit this like trim body or whatever. I got to look a certain way. And there's no focus on restore. There's no focus on like, how do you repair from those little mini injuries with exercise? Same thing here. Like, how do you repair from, or just balance the equation with just living in a certain frequency? And I think it's, so I love this conversation.
I think beyond that, to identifying when we are living in those frequencies, because when it becomes the normal, or when it becomes an experience because of your external circumstances.
Like expectation almost.
Expectation. Yeah. And also like, you have young kids, you're a career woman, plus you have a household. It's like stepping into action keeps you sane, or keeps you in that ability to do the work so that then you can bring in that balance and be able to kind of step into more softness by maybe bringing in some self-care. Kind of just reiterating what both of you are saying is that how do we identify when we're overcompensating or when we're really stuck here, maybe because of a past trauma, or maybe because that's just how we know how to operate in this world to feel some sense of control and safety and whatnot. So identifying and then creating those solutions that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love what you guys mentioned around the, like, is it conditioning, right? Like, I think that's a beautiful thing to illustrate. Like, are we talking about like societal conditioning? Or are we talking about someone's truth? Because I hear a lot of times too in the spiritual community and just in general, like all this black and white stuff. And I want to, preface everything I'm saying with, this is all just from the lens that I've experienced life. It's in my very humble opinion and the best I can come up with right now. Like maybe in 2 years from now, I'll be like, Amanda, what were you even talking about? But cool. Like, but we're all on our own unique journey. And so there's no one size fits all. And I feel like, especially when it, is coming from that beautiful heart-centered place, it's like, my journey is different from your journey. And those of you listening, it's like, we can take what resonates and leave the rest, because maybe there's something there for you. Maybe you got to go into burnout for a couple of years and really meet the depths of that burnout in order for you to know it. Cause I feel like there's a difference when we say stuff and then when we know it on a cellular level. And so I just want to preface that, because that's something that I learned through a lot of trial and error and lessons, and really, maybe even putting other teachers and mentors on a pedestal and not tuning into my own truth. And so it always comes back, I feel, to our own truth in any of these, because I've heard people say that there are females that it's just feminine and masculine, and we don't have both polarities. Like I only have feminine, and to me, that doesn't sit right with me. So I think, again, it's just using our discernment. I feel like our discernment is so powerful. And then again, maybe even if we would consider it, and I don't even think it's not a misstep, but maybe if we go down a different path and they're like, oh, wow, that was not what I expected, that we can pivot and go a different direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it creates more flexibility, because I do think there's so many layers to this conversation. And I think, and again, I'm going to also speak from the lens of a woman, there's confusion that was created through the feminist movement, which, allowed us these opportunities to do things at the same level as men. And so I think there's a lot of guilt that women feel if they decide, oh, maybe I just want to stay home with the kids and I don't want a career. And now they may feel judged by other women and saying that we're stepping backwards into the 50s or whatever. So there's confusion that shows up for all women. And I think if we just release that judgment on ourselves and each other, then we can do what you were just speaking to. We can kind of go down a path and see if that feels right for us, and maybe it doesn't. We can kind of backpedal and pivot to another path. And it's just, again, going back to like your own energies and where there might be some imbalance that needs some support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also think like in a world of never wanting to make a mistake, and like in a world of like constantly trying to like make the mistake work, like, we're seeing this even just with the current like pandemic that we're in. Like we keep trying to do the same thing over and over again and expecting we're going to get different results. It's kind of like, well, can we admit when something's not working and then course correct? Like, let's have a little bit of grace for ourselves and like, I screwed up. That was not going in the way that we intended to go. I'm sorry for my role in this. Let's course correct. But I think like, because there's such an attachment to the identity that we spoke to earlier, right? Like I need to present myself this way. And if I don't, then people will lose trust in me. And so we externalize so much of who we are, because we're not really spending that time to tap in. Because why can't we go through life and have a misstep in a conversation, which happens on a very regular basis with Sonia and I? Why can't we screw up and then come back together? Yeah. And I think like, wow, wouldn't that be nice if we could own our mistakes, own the shadow, pay attention to the emotional upset that's there, give yourself some grace in this experience of challenge that we're in. Yeah.
There's so much power in that too, because I think that's actually what people crave, is like, because it speaks to this connectedness and vulnerability, where we're not just like, I don't know it all. Like if someone says I know it all and I know how to, like, I don't even think we'd be here on this planet experiencing life in a human body if we knew it all. So we're all just doing the best we can and learning. But I think that at the end of the day, we have become even like disconnected as like a community. And it's like, if we could just be like, oh yeah, like that didn't work out as well as I thought it was. And I gave this information. Now I have this information. It's more accurate, or, whatever the thing is, it's like, again, with what you said, Sonia, just releasing the judgment for ourselves and others, it takes so much of the pressure off. Like, it just feels like, we're in a pressure cooker all these times, and it's like the saving face and the putting on, again, I think it speaks to, I feel it speaks to these characters that we play, right? These archetypes we step into and these characters that we play, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's how we're choosing to show up. And I always come back to, is this in alignment? Is this in alignment with my highest? Is this truth? And so if it isn't, then that's when we see like the chaos and the distortions and all the things that come up when it's something that isn't in alignment.
Mm-hmm. And like, to take it to the level of relationship, when we, like, I'll use Sonia and I as an example. When I'm honest and like, I really screwed up here. Like, I got that one wrong. She's willing to actually hear that, as opposed to like constantly, trying to buffer and trying to make myself look good. It's like, she can smell a rat. There's no point in even trying to do that. Actually, we had a conversation just yesterday where I said, Sonia, like, you asked me something. There's a huge part of me, probably like 85% of me, that wanted to lie to you and not, like, just because I didn't want to feel the wrath of
It had to do with our kids.
Yeah, it had to do with our kids. And there's part of me that just like, does she really need to know? Like, could I say something different? And I'm sure she was watching me like go through the dialogue in my head. And then ultimately I like obviously told her what was truth or what I shared with kids, which I shouldn't have. And but it felt so much better. And maybe it just felt better to me. I don't know. I think it felt better to you. And also it probably felt better to you knowing that I was struggling and sharing the struggles. But anyways, at the end of the day, like, having that open communication really makes for like trust and a space for vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some tangible things you could give our listeners that they could start doing just in their daily life as they're like observing themselves or trying to kind of create that connection with their soul? What are just some things that they can start implementing?
Yeah, there's 3 components to the work I do. One is conscious creation, one is presence, and one is the energy healing work. So I would recommend really getting intentional and clear about what it is that you want to experience. How do you want to feel? Because the mind and the body don't know the difference when we go into them with this meditative state and when we're visualizing and feeling. And so something that you can do that actually feels really expansive, really good. And I ask you to do this from a place of, because we could be like, oh, what do you want? And someone says, oh, I want a Porsche. Like, I would ask you and urge you to go just a little deeper than that. Like, what is it that your soul, that you truly deeply want to experience? Is it an intimate soulmate relationship? Is it connecting deeply with yourself? And then if you haven't ever met these parts of yourself before, experiences, you can even just ask for help from your higher self, God, source, universe, whatever word you use, and going into this, closing your eyes and just dropping into your heart and just really allowing yourself to feel what that would feel like. Because again, time is an illusion and we live in this quantum time-space reality to where we can really reach in and just say, this is what I want to experience, and really cultivating that within so it can show up in the external reality. Because we're always creating and manifesting. We're either doing that in a conscious state or an unconscious state. So we're always attracting, manifesting, all that stuff. And then I always say this is something more expansive, because then that releases my need to try to control it. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe the universe has something more expansive for me than what I think, what my conscious mind thinks. That's why I always say drop into the heart. And so again, with this, dropping into the heart, and really taking your energy out of the mind, the analytical mind. And you can even do some heart-centered breathing just to really presence yourself in your body. Again, I love breath work and meditation. Those are some of my favorite things. So if you feel guided to maybe find even like a breath work class or doing it on your own, or you can, like, I'm sure there's like podcasts and YouTube videos if you want to do something that's just easy and at home. Those are some beautiful things that you can do. And then again, just really coming back to the self, I would say, is like one of like the biggest things is really just when I'm working with people, it's like unraveling all the density so you can just embody who you are. You never lost it. You can never lose it. So one of the things that kind of goes into this is kind of taking inventory of where your yeses are really a no. Our receiving channel, I believe, gets mucked up when we have it filled with all these things where it's all the shoulds. So releasing the shoulds. And that might be small things. That might be places that you're eating. That might be, the friends that you're hanging out with. It could be a relationship. It could be the big ticket items, the career, all the things. But even just a conscious awareness to these things is so powerful. Even I'm not, suggesting that anyone go out and quit their job today, but a conscious awareness is, okay, this doesn't feel like a 10 out of 10. This doesn't feel like my highest. So I'm aware of this. And now I can set the intention for some shifts and you can kind of move in that direction. But it's when we're in these stagnant states and when we're showing up and we're waking up every day, we're on autopilot, maybe complaining about how much we don't like it, but yet we're showing up and it's Groundhog's Day every day. So those are the things that I'm mentioning here. So yeah, so those are some of the things that are easy. But again, anything too, I will suggest that you're doing, it's like, make it your own. So maybe you're learning some type of energy healing techniques, or for so long, I had this like perfectionist thing where I was like, oh, if I'm learning something, I have to do it exactly that way. At this point, all the energy healing work I do is literally a hodgepodge of everything I've learned. And it's kind of like my own thing. So you have your own unique, like soul essence, your own unique medicine, your own unique way that you sense things. And I had mentioned earlier too, if you feel kind of guided to maybe take a look at your human design, that can really be helpful, because again, it comes back to really getting connected back to yourself first and what your truth is. And if you've been disconnected from yourself for 30, 40, 50 years, like, don't be gentle with yourself. Don't expect this to happen overnight. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do this journey at all. So you can't get it wrong. So that's at least a cool thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's such an important message of self-awareness, and that's why I love like the human design or some of these astrology things, or even the face reading, like you mentioned, you just listen to Todd Frisch. And like, it's an opportunity to really get to know yourself. And I think even people who've maybe never even tried an energy session, maybe the outcome that you get is just an awareness of that subtle energy in the body, or deep relaxation, or something. There was probably some sort of shift that was there that you're not yet conscious of. And then to your point, it's like, it's just time. You can't expect to, bench 300 pounds and in the first try at the gym. It's going to take process and knowing yourself and gradually like improving. And I think, we're very quick to just throw things aside when we don't see like the magnificent, awe-inspiring meditation, for example, or the breath work that takes you to the heavens or whatever it may be. But really, maybe that first assessment is that self-awareness of like, hey, I feel like a little bit more relaxed right now. And that's a win, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we always end the show with a more personal question around impact. And so what we would love to know is that if you knew, I know with time, it doesn't exist in that linear fashion that we were speaking to, but if you knew that tomorrow was your last day in this human form on this earth, what kind of impact would you like to leave behind, or what kind of message would you like humanity to really sink into in remembrance of you?
Yeah. Again, just speaking to this connection with your truth. And I would just say like that connection to your soul and your unique essence, your innate essence. And so I would just urge people to really drop into that. And for me, it's like, if I spent my whole life really journeying to the truth of that, like I'm happy, because it's like, at least I met myself on like the deepest level that I was able to at that time. And so I would just say that is, again, my message of people, and also like tying into the fact that you know what's best for you at that deep soul level. And so really just cultivating that strength and that trust in yourself, and knowing that, you can choose to work with practitioners and people to help you and enhance this journey from a place of, okay, like I really feel like inspired to do this. But again, it's like, it's just that journey of coming back home to self, truly.
Thank you.
It's such an important message, especially in the world that we're in, where, you know, every day you turn on the TV, there's something else crazy going on that you have to be scared of in your external world, right? So coming back home to self is like, it's the message, it's the constant, it's the anchor that will always be there for people to access.
So where can people find you?
My Instagram, which is just my name, Amanda Monnier, and then my website, Amanda Monnier, is my name also. Probably the two best places to find me.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Amanda. It's been a just absolute pleasure talking about all these amazing concepts with you. And I really feel like you strung the heart chords of people tuning in. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people sitting on their yoga mats tomorrow.
Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you both so much for having me. And thank you everyone for listening. Thank you.